Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hello APGD, a neighborhood podcast about the Audubon Park Garden District in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Michael Lothrop, and today we'll be speaking with Representative Anna Eskamani of Florida's House District 42. Visit Team Anna's website at annaforflorida.com and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Anna for Florida. And remember, that's Anna with 2 N's. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you'd like to be a sponsor, please feel free to message me on Instagram at HelloAPGDPod. Thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you in part by Trevor Brown of Fannie Hillman & Associates. For listings, market trends, helpful home buyer and seller tips, email directly to trevor@fanniehillman.com or find him on Instagram at trevorbrown407. And with me today is Representative Anna Eskamani of Florida's House District 42, ranking member of the Democratic Ways and Means Committee, member of the Joint Administrative Procedures Committee, and adjunct professor at UCF. Welcome, Anna.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It is amazing to have you here. I hope that I got your intro correct. You do a lot of things, right?
Oh, we keep busy at Team Anna, that's for sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I will say I have no time these days to do any teaching at UCF, but I do hope to get back to it once I finish my PhD.
Sure, yeah. And how far along are you in your PhD?
I am so close, Michael.
Really?
But I
exciting.
Started in 2016, so I'm a little embarrassed. But
I mean, why? What has happened since 2016?
Oh my God. No, I literally started the semester that, President Trump won and then decided to run for office the following year for 2018. And of course, the pandemic. So I've had a lot of delays.
Right.
But I'm back on track. And my graduation timeline, my soft deadline is spring 2024. My hard deadline is summer 2024. But I'm aiming for spring.
That's excellent. Yeah. And you already have 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, right? I mean,
yeah, I'm a bit extra with the UCF stuff.
It's impressive. I mean, I know people talk about it all the time, but for how young you are, you really have accomplished so much already. And
Aww.
yeah, I mean, you're such an inspiration to so many people. I mean, you're the kind of hero that we need, especially right now when Florida just seems to be, I mean, I have friends that live out of state and they're constantly like, what's up with Florida? Why are you still there?
Yeah, they're probably just like, blink twice if you need help.
Right, exactly. I mean, we don't have a lot of the good news stories. They are happening here, but they don't make headlines, right?
Yeah, well, that's why your podcast and these podcasts that are hyper-local are so important because we have some really great stuff happening in Orlando, but nobody hears about it because all you hear is, Disney versus DeSantis or this is banned in Florida, right? Like you never actually hear like what's happening at a hyper-local level of folks who are not only fighting back, but giving back to their communities and trying to make Orlando a place where everyone can thrive.
Yeah, and it like those stories do have to be elevated because they take longer to tell. It doesn't like fit into clickbait headlines, and they don't get people talking as much because what is there to talk about necessarily other than like, oh, this really cool thing happened. Okay, cool. Next topic. It's like there's no piling on, and it just seems like the strategy of those who are kind of winning office are taking to that. They believe that no press is bad press, and as long as people are talking about them, it doesn't really matter what they're saying.
No, I agree with you. And I think there's 2 other variables I would add to that. One is that like social media does create an environment where like negativity rules, right? Yeah. Like, and I find myself surrounded by toxicity a lot, especially in politics, where it's like, even when we have a win, people always look at it and think, well, we didn't do this or X, Y. They always think of what we didn't do. And it's like, well, let's also focus on what we did do, like what we did get done, right? And find optimism in that. Yeah. And so, I don't know, the internet kind of creates like an echo chamber for being demoralized and being negative. Like, and I will say the second thought I have is like conflict is what gets most attention. So when we have like an awesome story of someone doing like really good stuff, local level, it just doesn't get the same attention as the tension or the conflict, because that's what people have been almost programmed to be attracted towards. And, I try not to fall into those traps as much as possible. Like, trust me, there are so many things, Michael, that I could complain about just from today.
Of course.
Like, I have such a long list of like, this person was like, for no reason, talking shit about me. Like, there's plenty of things I can go online and just like spill the tea and just be dramatic. But it's an intentional decision that I make where I say, I'm not going to be that person.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be that person, because I want to also model like a level of maturity and also focus for our community, that we don't get bogged down by haters. We don't get bogged down by negativity. We obviously have to address the problems we face, but the system needs all of us to repair it. And like, we have to focus on the system if things are going to get better in this community.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such an energy suck, right?
Yes.
Just like,
oh my God.
Like you can just tell the difference when you talk about something that you enjoy as opposed to talking about something that makes you feel defeated or helpless or hopeless, and I think that, as you said, we're so conditioned to it, the way that social media is set up and what becomes popular. And you in particular are a person that does such a great job, you and your team, with social media and highlighting the wins, really.
Absolutely.
Like all of the things that other people are doing as well in the community. And I mean, your social calendar must be insane.
Oh, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Even today, as an example, like I have a speaking engagement that's virtual with one of our Democratic clubs located in the Florida Keys, which I'll tell you, I was kind of hoping. I was like, oh, is this in person or virtual? I was like, oh, it's virtual. That's fine. But I'm glad it's virtual because I have a board meeting. I'm on the board of the Winter Park Playhouse.
Oh.
And so we have our board meeting later. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm packed, whether it's constituent meetings or campaign stuff or my school stuff. And as a reminder, I don't know if everyone knows this, but being in the state legislature is actually a part-time job.
Yeah.
We're only paid $28,000. That is literally my salary for the state house. So I have a separate day job that is remote in the nonprofit sector. I basically am like a nonprofit consultant, and I love it. And my boss is very flexible with me, but it's very challenging because I have to manage not just the constituent caseload and the session work and policy work, but I also literally have a day job. So, anytime I see, like a troll that's like, how much do we pay you to do this? I'm like, dude,
I
like,
can tell you because it's public.
I know. I'm like, all my finances are public. You can see how much y'all pay me, and like, and it's
It's not what you think.
No. Now, again, I think people have the perception that it's like a member of Congress, which members of Congress do make substantially more and have more staff. We have a district of 177,000 people and 2 staff.
Wow.
Yeah. So the Florida state government, as you could assume, is underfunded and overworked. In fact, almost all of state agencies have huge vacancies right now, which impacts the ability to deliver services, whether it's with small businesses or unemployment or DCF or DOH, you name it. Every agency is like struggling to keep up with demand. And that's, obviously why I'm in this work, because I'm trying to make government work for people. But just a reminder, too, that like these systems were built not to work. And that's why having good people is transformational. But it also is not easy because, the best people don't necessarily are going to have a source of income or wealth they can tap into. Like in my case, if I don't have this other job, I couldn't be a state lawmaker. That's the reality of it.
Yeah. And so building on that, for people that don't quite understand what your role is as House Representative, the district, the demarcation lines are essentially like Maitland to near the airport. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. So our district encompasses multiple municipalities. So we used to be District 47 when I first got elected, and then the U.S. Census data came out to the states back in every 10 years, so it was around 2020, 2021. And the legislature draws new maps, which is very problematic. I think it should be a third-party entity, but that's a conversation for another podcast.
Yeah.
But the legislature drew the maps, and the new maps that were drawn changed what was our district to be number 42, and basically we lost College Park in the reapportionment, but then we gained Maitland and the historic town of Eatonville. So our district became substantially longer with more municipalities, and so now it includes not just those two communities, but of course most of the city of Orlando. And then, as you mentioned, we go south all the way to Belle Isle, Edgewood, Pine Castle. And so it's a very diverse district. And you have folks who are, we also have Winter Park. So you have folks that live in some of the wealthiest zip codes in Florida. And then you have folks who are housing insecure who are currently sleeping under I-4. And I take the responsibility of meeting the needs of all of our constituents very seriously. But it does bring very unique challenges where you can't just be good at one thing, right? You really have to understand every issue. So that when someone contacts our office because they're worried about people speeding on their lakes, I have to be able to respond to that to the same degree of someone who's facing eviction and needs help finding housing.
Yeah, those are vastly different problems.
Yeah, but you know what? For every person, it's a problem. Like, that's what's so unique about public service is like, you really can't, you shouldn't have a bias. You shouldn't make assumptions about people, and you shouldn't disregard someone's concerns, because at the end of the day, if that is a problem for them, it is a problem for me. Like, I have to help solve it. And, some problems are going to be easier to solve than others, but at the end of the day, that's how you build trust with your constituents too, is when you do take their concerns seriously. Don't just write it off as being, insignificant. You take it seriously, and I think that's a really important part of public service.
Yeah, and you don't know exactly what kind of safety repercussions are going to be involved with people's requests and things like that. There can be other things that you're just not kind of realizing and putting that together, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. But to the heart of your question too, of like, what else does a state rep do? I mean, a lot of folks know us as like constituent services, which we are here when it comes to any issue with state government. And I say that because we do get a lot of emails and phone calls about federal issues, whether it's immigration or in this case, passports. We have so many passport problems and delays. Unfortunately, our office can't manage any type of federal issue. If it engages with a federal agency like the IRS or, UCSIS, like these are agencies that you really should contact either a member of Congress or a U.S. senator for. But we can help with almost everything else, things that involve state roads. If you have a traffic issue or a public safety issue with roads, if you have an issue with the prison system, Florida is home to one of the largest incarceration populations in the country. And so we do work with a lot of families that have incarcerated loved ones and trying to ensure that the prison conditions are safe and also that folks have a path, to restore their rights and so forth. We also do a lot of work with small businesses and regulation through DPR. But one of the biggest responsibilities that we have is during Florida's 60-day legislative session. And, unlike Congress, Florida has a part-time legislature that only meets once a year for 60 days straight. We do have committee weeks that build up to that, but that's when I'm in Tallahassee. So I actually live part-time in Tallahassee and part-time in Orlando, but most of my time is spent here in the district. I live in Thornton Park myself, so I'm only in Tallahassee for about four months of the year, give and take a few special sessions here and there. But that's where we actually work on policy, and that's where the state budget is crafted. And so those are, that's a very important component of the job. But when I'm not in Tallahassee, I'm in the district working on constituent cases or helping to amplify different resources or getting to know nonprofits and so forth.
And those are things that you are drawn to and you do because that's where your heart is, right? And not every representative of Florida is doing that in their off time. Is that correct? Is that an accurate statement?
I would say that.
Sure.
I mean, it's a really great question. So, as an example, I was doing an interview with one of our local TV stations and ran into another member, and they were telling me how they just came back from like a cruise and that kind of stuff, a post-session cruise. which is great. I mean, self-care is important, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking back in my head, like, how do you have time for that? like when I get out of Tallahassee, my main focus is how do I alert the public of what just happened? Right. And so, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, I use social media to communicate to the public, and we share clips from the House floor. Like, we try really hard to like keep the public informed and kind of be that news source for people too, of state government, of state politics. But at the same time, that's not good enough. You also need to bring these issues directly to the public. So, we were scheduling our town halls before session even ended because it's just in my eyes, the normal thing to do is before session, after session, you should host town halls and like engage with the public. And a lot of members don't do that. A lot of members, they will do public speaking, but it's groups that invite them. So for example, the Winter Park Chamber always hosts a legislative, kind of debrief breakfast event. And so I was invited to that alongside others. A lot of lawmakers, that's what they consider to be their legislative update. It's what different groups host to their audiences, which at the end of the day, it tends to be the same audience, right? Because if you're going to do, the chamber circuit, for example, which, during campaign season, there's lots of hobnobs and stuff like that. It's still really impactful, it's still really important, but it's the same audience because it's often the same people who have the same memberships, right, with different chambers and whatnot. And I think it's important that we expand that universe to reach new people. And part of that means hosting events on your own, picking diverse geographical areas, because oftentimes what I find is proximity matters. So if I'm going to host an event in Orlando, my Eatonville residents are not going to make it. It's just too far of a drive. So I need to host events in Eatonville. Same thing in Winter Park, same thing in Maitland, same thing in Belle Isle. Like, you have to bring events directly to people. Or at the very least, identify organizations that are in those areas that you can tap into, right? And that's an extra step that we go at Team Anna because representation matters and people need to have access to their elected officials, but by no means is that something everyone does. And I think that if you ask other members, they'll probably make excuses why they don't do that. But some also, candidly, they might just not have the capacity because if they are parents, if they have a full-time job that requires travel, I also empathize with some members because I'm in a good place to serve. Like, I don't have children. I have a job that's flexible, but I know a lot of people don't. Sure. So that's also, it's one of those dynamics where, like, unless we change the system of who can serve, then you're going to attract people who are not going to be able to give that level of service. So it's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah, and I think that you, in particular, are a unique person for this position as well because of your life experiences, right?
Oh, totally.
And tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a younger elected official. I mean, now with Maxwell Frost, like, it feels, I'm like, I'm pretty old. But when I first ran for office, I was 27. I was 28 when I got elected. Now I'm 33. So I'm a millennial, and I grew up here in Orlando as a daughter of working class immigrants. So my family did not have a lot of money growing up, which is a big reason why I advocate so much for economic security and economic mobility. And I just believe in the power of education as a transformational tool. And I do believe in the importance of safety nets and catching people before they fall. And so with that said, my family experienced huge heartache. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, and I was about 9 years old when she was first diagnosed, and then 13 when she passed away in 2004. And she passed away, at Florida Hospital, now Avid Health, right in the downtown area. I remember when we lost her, when she transitioned, we walked out of that hospital. It was probably like 2:00 in the morning, and it just was so quiet. Like, I just remember feeling like it's so quiet. And it was so difficult. But at the same time, for anyone who's been a caregiver, you can relate to this feeling of like, for years, your entire life was committed to being a caregiver for that person, and that person is no longer with you. It's a new chapter that opens. I mean, it's a very painful chapter, but it also is this opportunity to figure out, how am I going to honor this person for the rest of my life? Like, what does that look like for me? And I was only 13, but I knew that I wanted to model the selflessness of my mom, her courage, her bravery. And I wanted to live life twice as hard for her. And so as I went into high school, and my twin sister's a big part of this too. Like, we do everything together, and I'm so grateful to have her as that rock. But when we got to high school, we saw our first musical, which was Carousel, which I will say, I love Carousel. It's a little problematic these days, but it's still a good musical. It's a classic. And I just fell in love with theater. So I actually started doing high school theater. And my twin sister and I were techies. We weren't performers. We were always backstage, and we loved it. We built costumes, set pieces. We did props. We were known as the prop mistresses at University High School. And eventually, I actually thought I would study theater. I was on the path. My technical director really wanted us to go to Rollins and do theater production. But one thing about theater that I never could get over was this notion that once you build something and the show is over, you have to take it down.
Yeah.
And I just never could really grapple with that. I was like, I don't want to take it down. I want to keep building. I want to build upon it, build upon it. And so I had this amazing government teacher, Mr. Norris, and my senior year at University High School. And I already had like kind of a political inkling. Like, when I was 10 years old, I started my first ever petition. And it was to keep my best friend at the time from being moved to a different class period. Thus, we would no longer have lunch together. So
how did you hear about petitions at that age?
That's what's so crazy. I'm like, I don't even know.
Oh, wow.
Like, I'm sure I saw it in the movies. You know what I mean? Like, I probably saw it in like some sort of, my dad is
what
like
initiative though.
I know. But my dad is like a huge like classic movie buff. Like I grew up watching Star Wars. I grew up watching Indiana Jones. Like all these like classic, like films of like the late 70s, 80s, 90s, like, and as a 90s kid, I mean, honestly, I probably saw it on The Simpsons. Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
I probably, like, Lisa Simpson probably did a petition or something. That's probably what it was.
I could see that, yeah.
And so I actually, presented it to my principal, and she was like so shocked and like impressed and probably a little weirded out. And yeah, I actually did not win that campaign.
Really?
My friend still went to a different lunch period. But you can't win every battle, and it's always worth trying.
That's a good lesson in itself, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And so with that said, like so I kind of have this like underdog mentality, and my parents, I remember my mom's citizenship status, and the first time she voted, it was a very big deal in our house. But when she passed away, I went on, a totally different trajectory. As I mentioned, like I just kind of lost this political connection, but Mr. Norris brought it back, and he is such a cool dude. Like, he brought into the classroom the immigrant rights movement, the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement. Like, he really brought to light the reality that no one just gives you rights. You have to fight for it and advocate for it, especially in the context of the United States and our history. So when I applied for UCF, and UCF was a very natural choice for my sister and I, because not only did my dad go to UCF while raising his 3 kids with my mom, but my mom, one reason why they picked Orlando as their home was she wanted us to go to UCF, because my parents saw UCF as like a really great school, and they carried a lot of debt with them all through their lives. And so my mom's thought was like, you can stay home for school and don't have to carry on any debt. And I did qualify for Bright Futures. And so UCF, I applied to only 2 schools, because as I was applying to other schools, UCF accepted me, and I was like, okay, that's done. Like, I'm going to UCF. Like, it wasn't even, I didn't tour the campus. I mean, honestly, when we were kids, we used to play on campus at UCF.
Oh, cool.
But we didn't have that experience that so many kids have, where their parents tour colleges with them. That never happened for my sister and I. It was kind of already destined that we would go to UCF, just based on that foundation my mom had established for us. Yeah. And so at UCF, I got really involved in, community organizing, and was actually not a registered Democrat. I was registered NPA. Mm-hmm. And I became a Democrat in the summer of 2010, because the only 2 groups tabling at UCF that hot summer was the Iranian Student Organization, which my sister and I were a part of. And we were collecting human rights petitions at the time for Iran, and the College Dems. And so we started tabling together and getting to know each other better. And I remember changing my party affiliation that summer, getting involved with College Dem, specifically on women's issues. Because at the time, I had switched my major. I was an environmental science major, but I switched it to political science and picked up a minor in women's studies, and I changed into a double major. And I was doing a lot of research on international feminism and global women's rights movements. And so I thought that would be my path. I really thought I would go more into like the NGO path, United Nations. But then when I started getting involved with College Dems, I mean, the rest was just history. I dived deep into local issues, started volunteering with local nonprofits, got involved in League of Women Voters as a 20-year-old. Like the reason why the League of Women Voters has a student membership fee that was reduced compared to the regular one was because of me.
Nice.
I created the student membership fee because I told them, I was like, I cannot afford $60 to be a member. And so they created like a student discount.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a good organization. I mean, just
fabulous.
Fantastic.
Truly.
Yeah.
And so, but anyways, to fast forward a little bit, because I can be here for hours, I was offered a job at Planned Parenthood before I graduated. And Planned Parenthood has always had a special place in my heart because my mom did pass away when I was young. And so I had no one to talk to about issues around reproductive health, around informed consent, around healthy decision making. And at the time in my high school, we had absence-only education, which was not really education. And not only was that really disparaging, to kind of be told in the space that
it's like just say no, right? It's
100%. But even worse. Like we had, like our facilitator was she was actually from a church. Like she wasn't a medical practitioner. She wasn't like a health expert. She's from a church, and she spoke to. And this is a public school.
Wow.
And I took this class over the summer because summer school you could like take some of these necessary, course requirements around. I think it was like a PE class and like this life, lessons class, right? And like that's where we talked about menstruation, all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so this facilitator, she was just there for the day, and she told all of us that, engaging in sexual activity before marriage was committing a sin. And then she also told each one of us to take a mint to make a commitment to her
boy.
that we would not engage in sexual activity before marriage.
So much guilt.
Oh my God. She also used a piece of gum. So she asked this young man in the front if he wanted a stick of gum. And before she gave it to him, she put it in her mouth and she chewed it. Ooh. And took it out and said, well, now do you want it? Comparing the used stick of gum to like a woman or a girl who's had sex before. I mean, it was
exactly the same. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there as like a 16-year-old, like, what is going on? And, and I was very much a late bloomer as a kid. Like I was not dating. Like, I mean, again, I didn't have a mom to talk to. So everything was like so difficult for us. Like, it was very difficult. When my period started, my mom had already passed away. So like my sister and I had no menstruation items. We had to walk to Winn-Dixie like to eventually buy, menstruation items because we didn't have access to it. Like and
your dad probably didn't know how to be helpful, right?
No. And my dad, who is like so loving and so caring, just had way too much on his plate, right? I mean, he just lost his wife, and he had to keep working because we didn't have the finances for him not to work. And my aunt, who actually married into our family, so she kind of had a better understanding of like different government support systems, right? Because many immigrant families, we're not used to asking for help. So the notion of asking government for help is like it's just very foreign. Like it's not normal, especially with the stereotypes of like people of color being degraded for tapping into welfare, right?
Right.
So it was my aunt.
Plus they make it so difficult.
Oh, that too.
Like on purpose, right?
Oh,
As you said, so that it doesn't work as well.
100%. And so my family, despite having so many financial woes, like my mom never once complained about it. She worked at Kmart as her last job overtime. My dad had 2 jobs to help make ends meet. And like, we just never even thought of like asking for help in that way. Right. And so my aunt, who, like I said, married into the family. And so she kind of had a better grasp on these systems, encouraged my dad to apply to SSI for me and my twin sister so that we get some sort of compensation because of him being a widow. So we were able to secure, I think it was about $350 a month until we were 18 per kid. My brother was already 18, but for us two, that helped sustain my family a little bit. But my dad had to take a new job that was abroad to make additional funds. And so my brother was 18 at Valencia, and he was basically like the adult in the house, me and my twin sister. I mean, I look back at this and I'm always surprised that we made it out okay, because I was like, man, like, you know, all the risk factors were there for us, like, not to make it out okay. And yet somehow we made it. We made it. And
you were all just like hoisted into adulthood, like at such an early ages.
Oh yeah.
Like being a caretaker, you know, and like your brother becoming a parent to his sisters. Like,
oh yeah. Well, and anyone knows like an 18-year-old, you know, brother, he's probably not really the best adult to begin with. Like my sister and I were pretty much like, as we were probably most mature. Yeah, honestly, because my brother was going through so much of his own stuff, right? Sure. Like losing my mom was really hard for him too. Like we're all kind of navigating the trauma and the grief in different ways. But no, you're right. Our childhood was cut very short. But I think that also prepared me for where I am today, because I am someone who runs into the fire. I don't run away from it. I'm not afraid of crisis. I manage it very well. And a part of that is because of my lived experiences and also working at Planned Parenthood. As I mentioned, you know, I went to Planned Parenthood for contraception because I had that terrible experience in school. And so I was driven to find answers. And I walked into a Planned Parenthood when I was 18 years old, one right by UCF, and was able to have my questions answered, be treated with respect and dignity, and lead with a method of contraception that's right for me, that inspired me to spread the word to other students. So I really did a lot of peer-to-peer education and awareness and advocacy, and all through my UCF years, started writing for the school newspaper. And then if you think I'm opinionated now, imagine when I was in college. Like I wrote so many op-eds for the school newspaper on different issues. And the incoming CEO at Planned Parenthood she was getting her PhD at UCF, and she spotted me and offered me a job to basically be her executive assistant and like an event planner. So that's kind of how I started at Planned Parenthood, was very entry level and moved my way up for 6 years. I got my 2 masters and eventually became the senior director of public affairs and communications across 22 counties. Orlando was always my home base, but I traveled across the service area. So I would be in Sarasota some days. I'd be in Naples. I'd be in Tampa, Brevard, did a lot of work in Brevard County. So I also kind of laid the groundwork too of just like very organically, but our network, you know, like, which you just don't realize you're even doing that because it's just the right thing to do. But when I made the decision to run for office, it was very challenging. I wasn't sure if I should do it or not, but I just felt like, if I don't do this, there's going to be a generation of young women who will never do it, because representation does matter. And as many times as you encourage people to run for office, if they don't see people who look like them, who do it and do it successfully, they're not going to do it.
Right. And
I just felt that my actions and my decision would open up the door for so many others to follow the same trajectory. Yeah. And that, coupled with my love for Orlando, my love for my hometown, and the desire to build strong representation and set that role model for others, was my catalyst to say, okay, I'm gonna do this, and here we are today.
That's incredible. I mean, all of the things that you had experienced in your youth, like in your formative years, all tie into things that are happening in Florida, right? I mean, struggling with money issues, struggling with health issues, the reproductive rights question, like all of these things that are desperately needing attention, and they're not getting the kind of attention that they should be, or the funding that they should be, because of the people getting in the way of that. And they will remain nameless because I don't believe in speaking people's names. But it's very unhelpful. And I understand the function of government filling those roles where the market, basically there are market failures. Or there's no incentive, there's no profit to be made from helping people.
You got it.
But if you're not helping people, you don't have a functioning society.
Exactly.
And it's that simple. And why people can't understand that, and they make it about personalities rather than like people who are willing to help.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't care if I want to drink a beer with somebody. Are they good at their job? And that job that I just described of the function of government, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like we've so much like lost sight of that at this point. I hope that we can get an education on that and get back to that point where people like realize like, oh, we need to be helping everybody in the community, not just certain people.
Absolutely. I mean, I really want to just affirm the point you just made around like when you can help a family get out of poverty, it's a ripple effect. Not just in their family, but in the entire neighborhood, right? Yeah. Because then that family, it will be more economically secure. So the chances that they fall into crime is significantly reduced. And that crime could impact you and your family, right?
Right.
The ability to have a safe and secure home for that family means that their kids are going to do better in school. So their kids are going to be able to get a job, whether it's out of high school, they go to a college or some sort of post-secondary, and they might be someone you hire one day, right? And so it is that ripple effect, and it's just one of those reminders that even if you think you're not directly impacted, you are in some way. Yeah. You definitely are. And I will say, some of my proudest moments working on Planned Parenthood was the outreach we did to Republicans, because I do believe in the power of persuasion. If I didn't, I would not be in government. I would not run for office. I do feel like when you get to meet people and you open up your heart to them and you're willing to suspend judgment, you're willing to not have to have the last word, right? If you can kind of let go of your ego a little bit in those moments, it's remarkable what you can learn from each other, but also the relationship you're building long term. And when I would invite Republicans to tour our health centers, I'd have to promise them, like, we're not going to take any photos and we won't tweet about this, and you won't catch on fire, I promise. Like, it's going to be fine. And it was such an eye-opening experience for both of us because, one, they had so many questions. And a lot of folks, like, they've never been in a situation where they couldn't afford healthcare, right?
Right.
And so even just hearing about our services for STI treatment and testing, for pap smears, for all these preventative measures that for a lot of people, they have an OB/GYN they go to, right, through their insurance. But for other families, that's not possible. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know for me growing up, Planned Parenthood was my healthcare provider probably up until my 30s. Like, I still went to Planned Parenthood for everything. And that's normal for a lot of people, but not a lot of politicians. So I remember talking to one of the Republican lawmakers, and he was shocked at the cost of services if you don't have insurance compared to what we would offer. Mm-hmm. And it's those experiences that can build trust. It can also open up people's perspectives, help them question any misinformation they hear, right? And put a face to an organization that, unfortunately in this case, like some people have been programmed to despise regardless of what is true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it helps kind of combat that a little bit and helps people like re-examine what they think is true. Mm-hmm. And I look at myself, and there are many issues that probably more wonky issues, honestly, that like I have been able to learn about and evolve on, right? And to fit my values. And so it's just important to lead with our values because that opens up the door for more connectivity to others. Because at the end of the day, if you have the capacity to love, whether it's to love your pet or to love a partner, to love your kids, like if you have that capacity to love, then we're going to find something in common.
Yeah.
It might not be politics at first.
Sure.
But we'll find something in common. Yeah. And that is a good place to start.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Find out what people love and connect on that because we all have connections.
Right.
And more than one. And it's always going to be true, whether we want to identify them or not. And one of the things that you mentioned about ego, I think that, greed and ego are basically the two things that are getting in the way of solving most of our problems.
Right.
Really, like
it's so true.
Yeah.
Well, and like a misconception of power, right? Because I think that there are so many people who define power as a scarce resource,
and that comes with ego as well.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
And just a reminder that power is not scarce; it is infinite. It is neither good or bad. It depends who wields it, and it's substantially better when we all have power to share.
Right.
Because then all boats rise together. And as we mentioned, that is a healthier society. That is a more sustainable, resilient, and transformational environment where everyone is doing better because everyone's doing better.
Plus, there are checks and balances.
Yes.
And wow, we do not have that.
We have none of that right now. We have a consolidation of power. There are no more checks and balances in Florida. And it's scary. It's very unsettling. And it also breeds distrust, right? Because then people think, well, what's the point of voting? What's the point of getting involved? My voice doesn't matter. Because arguably, when power is consolidated, then you don't feel like your individual voice carries the weight that it once did.
And that's part of the strategy too,
Yes,
right?
to deflate.
Deflate, to instill fear. I think that those signs are what people need to look for when they vote. Is this person trying to make me afraid of something? Are they trying to inform me about something that, essentially we are in a place where there are some scary things that are currently happening. But the point is not to be afraid of them. The point is to figure out how we're going to change them together.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's the only way forward, really, because we're all part of this. We
it's
really
one planet.
are.
And this is our little slice of the planet.
Yeah.
And, we all want to be healthy, safe, and strong.
Right.
And so, like,
we all deserve that, too.
100%.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't want to take that from anybody else either.
No. And it's also, like, this philosophy. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
There's this philosophy that my success has to be tied to someone else's failure. And I don't think that's true.
No. How could it be?
Right. It's not a zero-sum game. Like, not every part of life is like a sporting event, right? Like, you don't have to tie your success to someone else's failure. We can all win at the same time.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like reprogramming the dominant belief structure where not everyone is going to do well at the same time. And that you're competitive with other people all the time. The only person you should be competitive with is yourself. Don't compare yourself to others. And that approach saves you so much stress, right? Because then you just focus on like your own personal growth while sharing what you learn with others at the same time so others can also grow at the same time.
Yeah, I think that it's so true. And that competitive spirit and the nature of that in looking at life's accomplishments and what other people have done, it becomes a threat to some people. Yeah. And it's so inappropriate. It is so irrelevant.
Well, and it feeds into like insecurities, right? Because but I think it's important to have mentors. And I think it's important to be inspired by others and to be motivated by others. Like I said earlier, representation does matter, but at the same time to trust yourself and to pace yourself and to set your own personal goals and to realize that just because someone else is successful doesn't mean that you can't be successful. And for those of us that like are in a position of influence, like we need to build new leaders as well. Like I take so much pride and focus on cultivating new leaders. Every one of my campaign managers have been new people. I have never picked the same person to manage all my campaigns.
Awesome.
Every cycle it's been a new person. My most recent campaign manager grew up in Winter Park, went to Winter Park High School, UCF student. We met her because my manager before was knocking on doors and saw that she had a Bernie sticker and she's putting it on her car, literally. And so Cheyenne was like, I think you're going to be engaged with us. Like, what's your name? And so, Shala, who's our past manager, became like our events planner, events coordinator, our field manager, and then became my manager last cycle. And so now she's helping me train our next manager, who is another fresh-faced, Floridian. So I I take so much pride in that notion of like, don't hold on to the knowledge don't hold on to that power, teach it and share it with others.
Yeah.
And when you model that same type of giving nature, then others will do the same.
Absolutely. It comes back around, and it's not even a matter of expecting it to or wanting it to. It just will.
Yeah. Karma is a real thing.
Karma is a real thing, right? I mean, it really shows. And also just that law of attraction, like what you expect and what you like your beliefs, and that, I don't know, what you're drawn to, that's going to be drawn to you as well, right?
Absolutely.
And to focus on that and the energy that people have, and if it matches with you, and partnering with people and teaming up and doing those things are so important. And just to find that way to be of service, because that, like, I don't know if there's ever been a study about this, but I feel like people who are in service of others live the longest, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I would almost just like guess that to be a truth.
Well,
and I have
people
nothing
that
to back it
are
up, but
kind,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and lead with kindness, I feel like are always going to have healthier and happier lives, right?
it must be true. I
Yeah.
mean, it feels so good to be good to others.
Yes.
And so how can that be wrong, you know? And you do get so powered from it, and rightly so, because
Yeah.
it's like, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Very Mr. Rogers, if you ask me.
I mean, he is such a hero of mine too. You know?
100%. You know, my mom loved Mr. Rogers, and she found his voice so comforting that when she was getting really sick, I would turn on the TV in the other room, and if Mr. Rogers was on, I would turn up the volume. She could hear it in her room.
Oh, that's
and
beautiful.
so he's always had a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, I think most of us really, it just and those kind of voices aren't widely available. You know,
Don't have them anymore.
I know.
We truly don't. You know, one of my girlfriends a while back was talking about how without Oprah on television, the way that she once was, like that's also led to a huge gap and like even more tension among specifically like racial tensions, because for a lot of white Americans, Oprah was the only person of color in their lives.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if there's been any research on that topic, but that was very interesting because we grew up watching Oprah all the time. And, you know, just that connectivity and like the trust that she had with people. And at the same time, her approach was very inquisitive and very curious, and like everyone should lead with wonder, right? And I don't think that's there anymore. I think instead people lead with judgment, and especially just with the cable news structure the way that it is today. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so many of these, I guess, you know, influencers, using air quotes, you know, of the 90s are gone, and I do think that's created a lot of gaps.
Yeah, they're looking with judgment, or they're looking for the punchline. You know, and there's not always one, and it doesn't have to be there to be engaging or educational or intriguing. Like, I think that so much growth can come from conversations like this. And I'm so grateful for this medium and this opportunity to talk to people like you, who I'm just like, I follow you online, and I'm just I'm so inspired every day, and I know so many people are. And you're doing incredible work, and I know everybody wants to know like what's next. I know you have a fourth term, and
God.
I'm sure you love that question. That's like your favorite question, right?
I know. I'm trying to figure it out,
Sure.
and I'm not coy about it. Like I am trying to figure it out. You know,
Sure.
we have one more term.
Look at how much changes in 4 years now too. So like, how can you really realistically answer that?
Thank you, Michael. That's what I keep telling myself. I'm like, so much can happen in 3 years. So much can happen, especially in Florida where it's so volatile.
We could have another January 6th, right?
God, I hope not. But yeah, you're right.
It's so insane that happened, right? And we're just like basically moving on with our everyday lives, and it's like, this is a thing that happened in our history, and we're not
very
like,
recently.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. And just so much uncertainty around us that it is hard to predict.
Yeah.
You know, where I'll be tomorrow, let alone in 2026. I mean, I will say that we do term out. You know, Florida has term limits. So my last election for the state house will be 2024. We're going to have a kickoff on September 5th of this year. So I hope folks can join us. It's going to be big and fabulous. But I got to figure out 2026, and a lot of folks encourage me to consider statewide. I just don't know if Florida has infrastructure for that. Like, I'm building infrastructure all the time, but that's not something you can shortchange. It takes time to build infrastructure to mimic something like what Stacey Abrams has built in Georgia. And even with her work, they're still not winning every race, right? So you have to be really critical about what's on the ground to sustain and secure an election win. And Florida is much more difficult than Georgia. So with that said, we're processing.
Yeah.
We're processing. I think there's going to be some really cool opportunities. There's also congressional maps being litigated right now, so I'm keeping my eyes open on that. There's just a lot of moving pieces, and hopefully the stars will align and help us figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, everything is in flux, and also we're very much hoping that people kind of see what's being done is not working, and it's not for the benefit of the people. The attack on education is very problematic. We were already behind, and now it's just like desperate and scary.
Right.
And that makes people pull out of Florida, and we can't continue that because we need smart, capable people here to like keep things moving in a good like societal manner, right? It's such a ripple effect.
It is. And I have one really good friend who is moving back to Florida to come to UCF.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, you might be one of the only people I know like moving back to higher ed in Florida because everyone's leaving.
I know.
But I'm really grateful he's doing that. But yeah, at the same time, you're absolutely right. We're in this really pivotal moment where so many good people, and I can't blame anyone, right?
Sure.
Like, you have to focus on the safety of your family,
right,
of your future career path.
And it's not that it's unsafe here per se, but there are things that could make us more safe. Obviously.
Well, and there are policies specifically targeting, for example, the LGBTQ plus community where you're not going to be able to access the care you need. I mean, that is the harsh reality right now, which we're fighting back. But if you could imagine, not being able to access the medication that you need every day to live, that's literally what's happening for our trans people right now. And so we have families of trans kids and trans adults who they can't be themselves here, and
it's literally life or death that they leave here.
Yes.
And why would a government do that to any citizen?
Oh my gosh,
right?
It's shocking. But I have many friends who have sent me their GoFundMe campaigns. Right, they've already got up and left, and I want to make sure they're happy and safe and healthy. And I hope we can build a state where they want to come back. That is my goal. But in the interim, we do have to keep one another safe. We do have to build up safety nets, in the private sector. Like, we have a Central Florida Emergency Trans Health Fund that was established by the Contigo Fund and the LGBTQ plus Center to serve as that safety net, because at this point we don't have any other options.
Yeah. Yeah, and you, on your website, annaforflorida.com, have tons of resources listed there. It's such a great website. I mean, I know you just recently were awarded or recognized for social media. Tell me about that. Yeah,
we got an award. It was kind of extra, honestly.
Okay.
But it was an award because we're the most effective, and I mean, they use the term power, but we're basically the most effective state lawmaker on Twitter was this award. Okay. Yeah. So and a part of it was because we're responsive to people.
Yes.
Which I was like, I mean, that's should be part of the job.
It should be part of right? Yeah.
But like a lot of lawmakers on social media, they don't actually talk to you. They just, they just use it to broadcast. They don't actually engage. And I'm trying to model, what the norm should be, but unfortunately, I think we're still the exception in a lot of ways.
Do you find that you are able to kind of win people over fairly frequently? Are you able to be successful? I mean, I know some people you're just not going to get through to, and they're just kind of looking to troll or to fight or whatever.
Like, I got an email today, and all the email said was, I don't even want to beep things out, but it was like liberal, see you next Tuesday. And that's all 3 words, all the email said. And I was like, why is this man subscribed to my emails in the first place? And I unsubscribed him.
Wow.
But yeah, so like we get that like kind of stuff.
That vitriol, you wonder truly, like, what kind of hurt is that person experiencing, right?
For sure, because that's not normal.
It's not, like, there's something missing from that person's life that has nothing to do with you. And,
correct.
Yeah. And
correct.
It's tragic that they have to take it out on somebody else who's not actually doing anything but looking out for them. Like,
right.
You probably have his best interests more than anybody else who's in office. And for him to miss that detail is such a bummer. And I hope that word can get out. I hope that people can realize that you're not here to make anybody feel bad or ostracize anybody.
No, definitely not.
You're here to help. And it's just it's so plain to see.
Well, and I say, because we keep our hearts open and our door open, there have been folks that campaigned aggressively against me in 2018 who last cycle were requesting yard signs. And so I do think it's important that I don't match that level of vitriol, right?
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, and it's kind of a good way to frame the conversation, right? Like I think it's very much of an Orlando value. Like Orlando is such a cool, young, scrappy town. Like we're, built on the backs of like a service economy, and we're trying to diversify, and we're trying to like just make it out okay, right? And raise our families and find community and build our spaces and invite others to them. And I think it's those values that were instilled in me as an Orlandonian that I try to mimic in everything I do.
I love that. It's so true. And it really ties back to even this neighborhood, which, like, I have lived here over 2 decades. I absolutely adore the people here, the shops, the lifestyle. It's for everybody, and it's so wonderful. And that inclusiveness and that just celebration, I think that Orlando gets it right on so many levels.
Totally.
And I don't think that we are taken seriously by a lot of people outside of here, which is fine, because a lot of us don't really care that much about being taken seriously, right?
We're pretty chill.
We're pretty chill.
We're pretty chill.
That's not the important thing, right? It's like, okay,
right.
You're not going to hurt my feelings by thinking Orlando's terrible. And there was like campaigns about like Orlando doesn't suck and all of those things.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's cool. There is a lot of like pride of place here.
Right.
And a lot of people that are investing in the shops and restaurants and bars and just places, those places to be. And you see just this surge of these new businesses, and they're thriving because people support them.
Totally.
And people are glad to be out of their houses again after the pandemic and the shutdown.
Absolutely.
And there's so much celebration here. And I think that detail is missed by a lot of people that aren't part of it. And I hope that, the guy that messaged you today realizes that he should maybe get out there and be part of it, like find his community.
Get off your computer and get off Fox News.
Yeah.
And like talk to humans.
Yeah. Because I mean, none of my friends would condone that kind of behavior.
Right.
For me to send a message like that to anybody, no matter who it was.
Same. The thought never even crosses my brain.
No.
Even of people that, I don't continue, considered friends or I disagree with, like that would never come across my mind ever.
I wouldn't want somebody to receive that from me or from anybody else.
Absolutely.
And it's just not, it's not what we should be doing. It's like,
no,
it's just noise. It's just it's like, it can be a distraction if we let it, and it's hard not to, right? Because
that's the choice that you have to make is how do you respond? Right. And in my case, I was like, I'm not going to respond, but I'm going to unsubscribe so I could save him the stress of getting more of my emails, which he clearly doesn't even want to get, but I'm very hopeful that, especially as more like millennials and Gen Z, kind of like continue to be in positions of decision making and like, have a bigger footprint in communities, because it'll evolve to be much more collaborative. Because I do think I have so many friends that lean more conservative, who are my age, who are my demographic, and they don't vote on party lines, right? They do their research, so they're more intentional. We won't agree on everything, but there are some basic foundational values we share, one of which is to be kind and to try to find compromise when you can versus be destructive.
And we can learn so much from friends like that as well, right? It's like,
oh, absolutely.
These are people that otherwise you might avoid because you're like, well, they don't think like me, so I just don't want to have anything to do with them. But that can be, there's a lot of like extremist thought that's happening and a lot of action that is just sort of like, it can only be this way and anybody else is going to have to fight me. And it's like, well, okay, but no, it's never that. It's never that black and white.
No, it's never. And you have to embrace the gray. You can't be afraid of the gray.
That's right. That's right. Well, Anna, I know I've got other questions, but I want to be very respectful of your time. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about or plug?
Just keep in touch with us. You mentioned our social media platform. So it's all at Anna for Florida, all spelled out with 2 N's, at Anna for Florida on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the places. And then, of course, if you need anything, feel free to hit that contact button on our website and let us know, and we'll definitely be there to help.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you so much. And, speaking of Audubon Park, is there anything that you would like to talk about as far as
I love Audubon
what are
Park.
some of your favorites? Yeah. I would be remiss to not cover that since that's the name of the podcast.
I love
right?
it. So I love Audubon Park, and actually I do a lot of my holiday shopping at Audubon Park, which is kind of like the only time I go shopping is holiday shopping.
Same.
But I'm a big fan of East End Market, Winter Park Biscuit Co., for sure.
Because you are a vegan?
I am a vegan, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the Lovely. I love doing, vintage and like thrift store shopping. I always tell everyone that I consider Audubon Park to be one of the best places to raise a family.
Yeah.
Just as you mentioned earlier, the neighborhoods are just so welcoming and diverse and friendly, and you also have some of the best schools in the area. And oh my gosh, like I've had the chance to speak to our elementary school kids and middle school kids along, of course, Winter Park High School. But I'm just always so taken aback by how like brilliant these kids are.
It's wild, isn't it?
It's amazing. It's truly amazing. And so
gives you hope.
It does. And I grew up going to Stardust. All through my college years. And I actually, this is super in the history books, but I used to sell items at the like Monday night market. I used to sell we had a table with, I think we were called like the Green Knights or some sort of like climate type of group, and we would sell purses made from recycled fabrics.
That's right.
To raise money. Yeah. So we used to do that. Like,
that's a deep cut.
Oh, it is a deep cut. It's a super deep cut. And
that's probably where we met originally,
It might have been. It was like 2010, honey. Yeah. And so I was a college student, and we would sell those items and just raise money for our club. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's so cool.
Yeah, good memories for sure. I love Stardust. What a great space.
Yeah. Well, we love seeing you around here, and just thank you for all you do. I'm looking forward to seeing what other accomplishments you'll have in the future. No pressure. If you need to take some self-care, go on a cruise, take a trip.
Thank you.
Please remember to do that as well. I know balance can be hard, especially when you are such a driven individual and there is so much work to do. But we do need to recharge and as you said, take it one day at a time and have your goals and that sort of thing. I think that's great advice.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, totally. We'll see you around.
Absolutely.
This episode is brought to you in part by the Audubon Park Community Market. Join us every Monday from 5 to 8 p.m. rain or shine in the parking lot of Stardust Video and Coffee. Located at 1842 East Winter Park Road, this weekly gathering of makers, farmers, gardeners, fishmongers, ranchers, craftsmen, artisans, entrepreneurs, neighbors, and friends, brings the very best of Central Florida to you every week. We do hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please click subscribe and leave a review if you'd like. We'll see you next time.